The cold of a Guadalajara December is a profound thing, a chill that seeps through metal and glass to settle in the marrow. 20 years ago, on such a night, I was driving home from the restaurant where I worked. The highway was a dark ribbon, the city lights a distant smear. My headlights carved a tunnel through the blackness, and in that tunnel I saw a figure walking along the gravel shoulder. It was not uncommon to see pedestrians even at that hour. But as I drew closer, my heart clenched. It was the mother of my friend Daniela. She wore a long black dress, white gloves that glowed in the gloom, and simple black sandals. The incongruity was jarring. She was a woman who felt the cold deeply, yet here she was without a shawl or coat, exposed to the bitter wind. Concern overrode unease. I pulled alongside her, rolled down the window, and called out, "Senora, please get in. What are you doing out here in this cold?" She turned slowly. Her face was pale and serene. She offered a small, placid smile, but said nothing. She opened the rear door and slid into the back seat. I heard the latch click, but in the rearview mirror I saw only a dark shape, no movement. A deeper cold entered the car, a stillness that went beyond the absence of the heater. The drive to her daughter's house was only a few blocks. I filled the silence with nervous chatter, asking after her health, commenting on the weather. My words fell into the void behind me. There was no reply, not even the sound of breathing. The air grew thick and frigid. When I finally pulled up to the familiar curb, relief washed over me. Trying to lighten the oppressive mood, I turned my head slightly and forced a laugh. "Well, that'll be 50 pesos, your personal taxi service." Silence. I turned fully to look into the back seat. It was empty. The door was still locked. I had not heard it open or close. A cold finger traced my spine. I stared at the vacant upholstery, my mind refusing to process the sight. Then, the front door of the house opened. Daniela stepped onto the porch, her face drawn in the yellow light. She saw me and frowned, walking over to the car. "Martina, what's wrong? You're white as a sheet." Her eyes were red-rimmed, her mascara smudged. She had been crying. You already heard, didn't you?" "Heard what?" My voice was a dry whisper. She took a shaky breath. "We're holding the wake for my mother. She passed 2 days ago." The world tilted. The cold in the car became the cold of the grave. I don't remember fainting, but I must have, for the next thing I knew, I was inside that house, surrounded by the scent of wax and flowers. Candles flickered around a simple coffin, and within it, dressed in a long black dress and white gloves, was Daniela's mother. I never spoke of what happened that night, not then. The grief was too raw, the terror too intimate. Only weeks later, when the sharpest pain had softened it to a dull ache, did I confess to Daniela. I told her of the figure on the road, the silent ride, the empty seat. She listened without surprise, her gaze distant. When I finished, she simply nodded. "They say," she murmured, "that when someone dies, their spirit must retrace its steps before it can leave. My mother, when she was worried, she would walk for miles down that avenue to clear her head. I suppose she was just finishing her walk. I think of her often, retracing the paths of her life in the silent hours. And I wonder, on the coldest nights, whose steps I might one day follow." I was raised in a small Salvadoran town cradled by mountains, its heart a deep, placid lake. My father, Don Alberto, was that lake's soul. A lifelong fisherman, he knew every cove, every sunken log, every path through the coffee fields that skirted the water. He was a man of simple, profound beliefs. "The places you love," he'd say, his eyes on the horizon, "they get into your blood. When you're gone, your shadow will walk them again." I dismissed it as the poetic fancy of an old man, until he died. A year ago, a sudden silence fell in his hammock one morning. The grief was a physical weight, but it was what began after his burial that hollowed me out. The whispers started with his friend, Chep, who swore he saw my father at dawn, sitting on the old dock, gazing at the water. Then, Doña Marta claimed she saw him in the market, his straw hat bobbing through the crowd. I shook my head at their stories, attributing them to sorrow. Then, I saw him myself. It was late. I was walking back from the store, the cobblestones gleaming under a sliver of moon. On the corner of the central plaza, where he always sat with his cronies, A figure rested on the low wall. The plaid shirt, the straw hat, the set of his shoulders. My breath vanished. I wanted to call out, but a fist of ice closed around my throat. As I stood frozen, he stood up with his familiar unhurried motion and began to walk. I followed, driven by a compulsion I did not understand. My legs were lead, yet I stumbled after him. He turned onto the dirt path that led to the lake, his form clear in the moonlight. I broke into a run, but I could not close the distance. He remained ahead, a constant, unreachable silhouette. We reached the pier. He stopped at its very end, several meters ahead of me. The moon cast a silver path on the water, and he seemed to glow with a faint ethereal light. I finally found my voice. "Papa?" He did not turn, but I heard him. The voice was not in the air, it was inside my skull, a whisper of wind and memory. I am retracing my steps. Then he was gone. Not fading, but ceasing to be, like a candle snuffed. The night sounds rushed back, the lapping water, the crickets, sounding louder in the sudden void. I stood alone on the pier for a long time. Now I understand. He is walking all the paths he loved, a final pilgrimage. Some nights I walk them too, hoping to catch a glimpse of his silent shadow, and his old words return to me, now heavy with a new meaning. I wonder how long it will be before I too must begin to trace my own. In 1998, in my hometown in Zacatecas, I was a boy in elementary school. One of our teachers, Mr. Edgar, was a family friend. He was from Aguascalientes but rented a house in our town. He would often come for lunch, and he adored my mother's enchiladas. One afternoon, after a particularly good meal, my mother told him, "Whenever you like, this table is yours." He smiled warmly. "Thank you, Doña Consuelo. I would be delighted to return." Then he stopped coming to school. Days passed. The rumor, when it came, was a shock. Mr. Edgar had been found in his rented house. He had been dead for days before the cleaning lady discovered him. We, his students, couldn't believe it. A group of us went to the house, drawn by a morbid, youthful curiosity. By the time we arrived, the authorities were there, police, forensic personnel. We watched from a distance as they worked. Around 9 in the evening, they carried out a shape wrapped in a blanket, loaded it into a truck, and drove away. My mother and I returned home. An unnatural quiet had settled over the town. Then, the wind began. It was not a natural gust, but a focused, howling gale that slammed against our windows as if trying to break in. We locked the doors and went to bed, fear keeping us awake. That's when the noises started. Distinct footsteps on the roof. Then, from the unused rooms at the back of the house, the unmistakable sound of chair legs scraping across the tile floor. We huddled together, listening. The house was empty save for us, yet it was full of movement. It stopped as abruptly as it began. The next morning, over a tense breakfast, my mother spoke quietly. "I believe Mr. Edgar kept his promise. He said he would return." Time blurred the sharp edges of that fear, but it never left entirely. Some afternoons later, playing soccer after school, we heard noises from his old classroom. A loud, rhythmic thumping. We peered through the window. The room was dark and empty. Another time we heard the heavy flagpole chain clinking violently. Though there was no wind dot, the final incident broke our nerve. We were in the courtyard when we heard a loud crash from inside the classroom. Rushing to the door, we saw a heavy teacher's desk, which had been against the wall, now lying in the center of the room, as if thrown. We did not investigate, we simply ran. We never played near that building again. My mother's words became my truth. He had promised to return. And some promises, it seems, are kept beyond the grave. 10 years ago, my world was whole. I had a home, a young son named Sebastian, and Anna, my wife. Her night shift at the hospital in San Luis Potosi was a source of constant worry for me. She took the same bus every evening and morning. One early dawn, on the short walk from her stop to our door, a mugger's knife took her life. Our home became a museum of absence. Sebastian was 5. His grief was a quiet, confused thing. Then he began to tell me he saw his mother. "Daddy, Mommy came last night," he'd say, coloring earnestly. "She stands by my door and watches me sleep." I would hold him, my blood chilling. "Sweetheart, Mommy is in heaven. She can't come here." But he was insistent, his description simple and unwavering. "I saw Anna only in dreams, always in the park where we took Sebastian, always in her white nurse's uniform, bag over her shoulder. I would move to hug her, and I would wake, clutching emptiness. Then Claudia came to our door. She was Anna's friend and co-worker. Her face was tight with confusion. "Mario," she said, "I saw Anna yesterday. I was wondering why she hadn't been at work." The floor dropped away. "What?" "On the bus, our usual bus. I didn't see her get on, but when we got to her stop, I saw her get off. I tried to catch up, but the crowd..." She reached the sidewalk and turned back. She saw me through the bus window. She smiled and waved. Then she was gone into the people. "Is she okay?" My tongue felt numb. "Claudia, Anna died 3 days ago." Her face crumpled from confusion to horror. "Don't say that. That's not funny." Sebastian padded into the hallway then, rubbing his eyes. "My mommy is in heaven," he said softly. The silence in the foyer was absolute. Claudia left shortly after, her face ashen. I was left with a terrible understanding. Anna was still taking the bus. She was walking her old route home, retracing the steps that were violently cut short. Now, every night, I sit in the dark living room after Sebastian goes to bed. Sometimes I hear him whispering to someone. And sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, I hear footsteps in the hallway, a familiar, gentle cadence. I do not get up to look. I simply listen, wondering if she will ever reach the end of her journey, or if she is forever walking home. My grandfather, Julian, was a creature of habit. He lived with us in our family home in Tlacpac, Guadalajara. Every morning he walked to the same corner for coffee, then to the plaza to hold court with his friends. He'd joke, "One day, I'll take you all with me to the other side." When he died, the house felt his absence like a missing tooth, but his presence lingered. My mother smelled his cologne. I heard his slow, shuffling steps in the hallway at night. I dismissed it as grief playing tricks. Then, 2 days after his funeral, I saw him. In the plaza, on his usual bench, he was staring straight ahead, solid and real. I froze, my heart hammering. I blinked and he was gone. I was not the only one. The coffee stand owner told me in a hushed voice that he served my grandfather a black coffee the morning after he died. He was there, clear as day. I turned to get the sugar, turned back, gone. Others saw him too, at the OXXO where he bought cigarettes on his usual streets. The town was quietly buzzing with sightings. My mother was terrified. "He's retracing his steps," she said. "When the dead show themselves so much they're not ready to go, something is holding them here." I refused to believe until I saw him in our home. It was near midnight. I heard the living room footsteps, his footsteps. I peeked through my bedroom door. He stood by his armchair, pale, his clothes darker than in life. His face was etched with a deep worry I had never seen in him. "Abuelo," I breathed. He didn't look at me, but I felt the words form in the cold air of the hallway, a whisper that bypassed my ears and went straight into my mind. I don't want to leave. A paralyzing chill locked my joints. I slammed my door and stayed there until morning. The next day, my mother and I went to church. The priest told us we had to give him permission to go, to release him. That night, we lit candles before his photograph. "Go in peace, Abuelo," we said. "We are all right. You can go now." The nightly footsteps ceased. The sightings stopped. It was as if, once acknowledged and released, he had finally finished walking his cherished, familiar circuit and could continue on his way. The habits of a lifetime, it seems, are the last thing a spirit relinquishes. Years ago in Zacatecas, I ran a clothing store from the ground floor of my home. Business was good. Needing displays, I accepted a trade from a young woman. Children's clothing for 2 mannequins, a boy and a girl. They were simple, white, fully jointed forms. The strangeness began that first night. My husband woke me at 2 a.m., insisting he heard children laughing inside the locked store. He'd gone down to look and swore he saw the 2 mannequins not on their platform, but in the middle of the floor, as if caught mid-step. I told him it was a dream. But the next morning, my store was in disarray. My employee, a sensitive woman, felt a heavy, oppressive vibe the moment she entered. The following night, we were doing late inventory. At 1 a.m., she gasped, pointing. "The girl mannequin, its head turned." I saw nothing. Then the lights went out. In the utter blackness, the laughter began, high, clear, and hysterical, echoing as if two children were chasing each other around the racks. Our blood turned to ice. As our eyes adjusted, we saw them. Two small, dark silhouettes standing hand in hand in the center of the store. They were not the mannequins. They were shadows of children. The lights flickered back on. The store was empty. I knew then. The mannequins were the anchor. The next day, I resolved to discard them. As I drove them to the dump, I kept checking the rear view. I swear I saw the girl mannequin's head loll to the side, not from the bumps in the road, but with a deliberate slowness. Then, a small, plaintive voice, seeming to come from the very back seat, whispered, "Don't leave us here." Terror overriding all else, I skidded to a stop near the trash heaps, threw the mannequins into the filth, and sped away. The laughter in my home stopped. The store grew quiet. My employee believed the mannequins were vessels, holding spirits that could not move on. I never learned their story. I only know I took something in that trade that was not mine to take, and for a few terrible days I hosted two lost souls desperate not to be abandoned again. This is an old legend from Leon, not my own, but one etched into the fear of a neighborhood. Long ago, a man from San Francisco del Rincon, a practitioner of dark arts, moved to Barrio Arriba. His power grew, and so did the dread surrounding him. It was whispered he had made a pact with the devil, his soul, in exchange for power in this life. The final term was that the devil would claim his body upon his death. The sorcerer, named Aperio, performed terrible works for those who sought him. Spells, curses, manipulations that led to ruin and death. His fame was a foul thing. When he finally died, only his mother attended him. His last wish was specific. His body was to be placed in a simple wooden coffin and buried in unconsecrated ground, far from any cemetery. But his mother, in her grief, secured a small room in the funeral home called Cristo Rey. To hold a proper wake-bit was a sparse gathering, lit by votive candles. As midnight approached, the few mourners prayed for his soul. Just as the clock told the hour, the atmosphere shifted. The candle flames, without draft or cause, stretched and bent, reaching like fingers toward the coffin. They engulfed the wooden box in a sudden, silent conflagration. The witnesses fled in terror. From outside, they saw the room blaze with an unnatural light, then plunge into darkness. In that darkness, where the coffin had been, stood the silhouette of a man in a fine suit. It stood for a moment, then vanished. When they dared re-enter, they found only a charred, empty coffin. Aperio's body was gone. The devil, they said, had collected on his pact. The building, the very spot of that wake, has never known peace. Those who live on 20 de Enero Street and nearby still hear things at night, muffled voices, the sound of flames where there is no fire, the sense of a watched, crowded emptiness. Some refuse to walk on that sidewalk, for the echo of that bargain, and the moment it was fulfilled, lingers in the stones. The fear remains, a cold heirloom passed down through the generations.